The moment I signed the papers, my wife relaxed. That was how I knew she believed the story was over. In her mind, the money had already rewritten our past. The house was already hers, and I was already gone. What she didn't understand was that inheritances don't just pass down wealth. Sometimes they pass down conditions, witnesses, and unfinished intentions. My phone vibrated against my hip at 2:17 p.m. Her name lit the screen. I stepped away from the CNC line, wiped my hands on a rag that used to be white, and answered with my work voice. Steady, courteous, already tired. "Hey, everything okay?" Her breath came through crisp, bright, almost laughing. Not with joy, with certainty. "I just inherited millions," Brandy said. "Pack your things, get out of my house." For a moment, I swear the shop went quiet in my head. The cutting tools kept spinning, my guys kept moving, but inside me there was a clean, sudden silence, like when a breaker flips and a building forgets how to hum. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Uncle Raymond's estate cleared. The attorney called this morning." She didn't bother with hello, didn't bother with the girls, didn't bother with the life we'd built. "I'll be home at 6. I expect you gone." The line went dead. I stared at the screen until it dimmed and turned itself into a dark mirror. 52 years old, grease under my nails, hearing my wife say my house like my name had been erased from the last 27 years. And the strangest part, I didn't panic. 2 weeks earlier, I'd gotten a call too, before the hospice smell had even left my clothes. Raymond's voice had sounded like paper rubbed between fingers, but his mind had been sharp enough to cut glass. "Henry," he'd said, "there are protections in the will. She doesn't know. When she finds out what she's getting, she'll make a move. Be ready." "Document everything." I tried to ask questions, but he'd coughed until the line filled with that brittle rattle and then softer. "Trust the process." I told myself it was just an old man settling unfinished business, trying to feel useful on the way out. I told myself Brandy wouldn't do something so cold, so theatrical. Then she did, right on schedule. I left my foreman with a single sentence I could barely taste. "Family emergency." My hands didn't shake until I reached my truck. That's when the wheel felt slick under my palms, like I'd suddenly forgotten what skin was for. The drive home took 19 minutes. Every stoplight felt like a judge considering my character. I kept seeing moments like snapshots. Brandy laughing in our kitchen, Brandy asleep with her hair fanned out on the pillow, Brandy holding our first daughter like the world had finally made sense. And over each image, her voice, bright and clean. "Get out of my house." When I pulled into the driveway, every light in the house was on. All of them. It looked staged, like a set dressed to sell a story. I walked in and found a folder on the dining table, placed perfectly square to the edge like she'd measured it. Divorce papers. No trembling hand, no conversation, no attempt at decency. Just ink and exit routes. Brandy stood in the living room wearing the kind of outfit she reserved for important meetings. Chin lifted, eyes hard, like she was already practicing for the version of herself that would never need me again. "Sign," she said, "then leave." I opened the folder. The documents looked convincing at first glance. Thick paper, official formatting, the weight of authority. But I'd spent my life reading tolerances. I could smell what was off. No court stamps, no case number, no proper notarization. She didn't notice my eyes slowing down, tracking the small errors. She only watched my face, waiting for the crack, waiting for my voice to turn small. I picked up the pen. I smiled, just enough to confuse her. I signed, and when I set the pen down, I saw the relief spread across her mouth like sunrise. She thought that was the ending. She had no idea it was only the moment the story finally became measurable. I didn't go far. I went somewhere anonymous. Chain carpet, neutral art, hallway that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old coffee. A place with cameras and receipts and a front desk clerk who looked like he'd learned long ago not to ask. I I needed that. Not comfort. Recording. In the room, I put my bag on the bed and sat at the small desk like I was clocking into a shift. My hands were steadier now. Anger hadn't arrived yet. Not hot anger. Something colder. Something that felt like my mind had put on gloves. The first thing I did was photograph every page she'd handed me. Then I opened my laptop and logged into our bank account. Brandy had always handled finances. I told myself it was practical. I ran the shop, she ran the home. A division of labor, a marriage built on trust. Trust, I learned, is just a word people use when they don't want to check. At first, the transactions looked normal. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, kids' activities. Then I widened the date range. 6 months, a year, 2. That's when I saw the transfers. Small amounts, a few hundred, sometimes 800. Once, 2,000. Always on weekdays. Always to an account I didn't recognize. The recipient name was her mother's. I scrolled and scrolled until my thumb hurt. 7 years. 7 years of quiet siphoning. So consistent it felt like a subscription to betrayal. I started a spreadsheet because my brain needed totals the way lungs need air. When the final number landed, it sat there on the screen like an accusation. $243,000. $250,000, taken in increments small enough to hide inside life. I stared at the figure until the room seemed to tilt. Then I checked our health insurance portal. A notification sat in my email, 3 days old. A request to remove me from the family policy. Pending review, submitted by Brandy. I read it twice, 3 times. I have a chronic condition that isn't dramatic, just persistent. The kind that demands routine and medication and attention. Brandy had been at my appointments. She knew exactly what the prescriptions cost without coverage. She tried to cut me off before she even made her victory call. That was the moment anger finally arrived, but it didn't burn. It sharpened. I took screenshots. I saved PDFs. I forwarded everything to a private email account she didn't know existed. Then I opened my Notes app and began a timeline. Call at 2:17 p.m. Documents on table at 5:42 p.m. Insurance request 3 days prior. Transfers spanning 7 years. It wasn't grief, it was evidence. My phone buzzed with her first text. Don't think you can fight this. Then another. You always held me back. Then, answer me. I stared at the glowing screen, felt my pulse slow, and typed the only sentence that mattered. All communication through counsel. Her reply came instantly. You can't afford counsel. I didn't respond, because Raymond's voice was still in my head, thin as a thread, steady as steel. Trust the process. And for the first time in a long time, I did. The probate office was a gray building that smelled like paper and old decisions. Brandy was already there in the hallway, dressed like she'd stepped out of an advertisement for winning. Beside her stood a woman in a tailored suit, her attorney, I assumed, eyes scanning me like I was an inconvenience with legs. Brandy's gaze slid over my face and hardened into something pleased. "What are you doing here?" she asked too loudly, as if volume could turn a fact into a verdict. I held up the notice. I was requested. Her attorney leaned forward. "My client is the beneficiary. I believe this is unnecessary." A clerk opened a door and called us in. A probate officer, Mrs. Delgado sat at the head of a long table with a thick file in front of her. She looked like a woman who'd seen every version of family love curdle into paperwork. "This estate is unusual," she said, opening the file. "Mr. Mitchell included provisions that require review before distribution." Brandy's smile showed up right on cue. Small, satisfied, already tasting the money. "Mrs. Lane," Mrs. Delgado continued, "you are the primary beneficiary of an estate valued at approximately $1.2 million. Brandy's shoulders relaxed. The lawyer's eyes flicked, pleased. Then Mrs. Delgado turned the page. However, there are restrictions. I watched Brandy's smile hang there, suddenly unsupported. The estate includes 3 rental properties with existing tenants, Mrs. Delgado said. The will specifies the tenants may not be removed, and rents may not be increased beyond cost of living adjustments for 5 years. Brandy's eyebrows lifted in disbelief. That's ridiculous. Mrs. Delgado didn't react. Additionally, the will requires an 18-month administrative period with compliance oversight. Mr. Henry Lane is appointed as observer and compliance officer. The room did something strange, like oxygen shifted. Brandy's mouth opened, then closed. That's insane, she said. He's not family. Mrs. Delgado's eyes were flat. Mr. Mitchell was explicit. Any major decisions regarding liquidation or leverage of estate assets must be documented and verified by Mr. Lane. The will also includes language discouraging the use of inheritance proceeds to force a spouse from a shared home without proper legal process and adequate support. I didn't look at Brandy. I looked down at my hands because I could feel the tremor of something like vindication, and I didn't want it to show. Her attorney spoke, sharp. We'll contest. Mrs. Delgado nodded once. You may attempt to, but as it stands, distribution is paused until these provisions are honored. That was when Brandy's phone vibrated. She glanced down, and a tiny flare of irritation crossed her face. Money delayed, control interrupted, the universe refusing to cooperate. And then my phone buzzed too. A text from a local realtor I vaguely remembered from a neighborhood event. Mr. Lane, your wife listed your home for sale last night. A buyer submitted a $50,000 deposit. They want signatures today. Please call ASAP. I stared at the message until it felt unreal. Brandy wasn't just pushing me out. She'd been trying to erase me at speed. I showed the text to my attorney, Tom Patterson, a man who'd helped me incorporate my shop years ago and who'd taken my call first thing that morning. Tom's jaw tightened. Mrs. Delgado, he said calmly, we may have an urgent issue of unauthorized transaction. Brandy's head snapped toward us. That's none of your business. Tom's voice stayed level. If she's attempting to sell marital property without proper authority, it becomes everyone's business. Mrs. Delgado made a note without looking up. Brandy's confidence didn't collapse. Not fully, but it cracked. And for the first time since her triumphant phone call, I saw it. Fear, not of losing me, but of losing control. We drove straight from probate to the realtor's office. Tom drove like a man who'd spent decades watching people panic too late and hated the feeling of arriving after the damage. In the lobby sat the buyer. He was in his 70s, dressed with quiet authority, pressed suit, calm posture, eyes that didn't ask for permission. He rose when we entered, and the room seemed to rearrange itself around his presence. Judge Sterling, Tom said, extending his hand. My stomach tightened. A retired federal judge. Of course, Brandy would pick someone with gravity. The realtor, David Foster, as it turned out, looked like he hadn't slept. He led us into a conference room where a neat stack of papers sat waiting like an ambush. Judge Sterling folded his hands. I was told this was straightforward. I'd prefer it remain that way. Tom didn't waste time. He laid out the facts. No finalized filings, no court authorization, a will now restricting asset maneuvers, and, most importantly, Brandy's lack of unilateral authority over the home. The judge listened without interrupting, the way people listen when they've spent their lives deciding what counts. When Tom finished, Judge Sterling turned to the realtor. Did you verify Mrs. Lane's authority to sell? David swallowed. She had documents, a letter from counsel. No deed transfer? The judge asked. No. No court filing? No. The silence afterward felt heavy enough to bruise. Judge Sterling stood. Return my deposit within 48 hours. I won't pursue this further if handled promptly, but I will document the misrepresentation. He looked at me then. Not kindly, not cruelly, just humanly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I've seen people do foolish things when they smell money." Then he walked out. David's shoulders sagged like a tent in rain. "Mr. Lane, I didn't." She was very convincing. Tom nodded once. "Take it as a lesson. Confidence isn't authority." As we left, my phone buzzed with Brandy's name. I let it ring, twice, 3 times. Then her text arrived. "You're embarrassing me." That one sentence told me everything. Not "you're hurting me." Not "why are you doing this?" Not "can we talk?" Just, "you're embarrassing me." I sat in the passenger seat and watched the city pass by like a film I'd already seen. My life with Brandy hadn't ended when she told me to leave. It had ended years ago. Maybe the first time she moved money quietly. Maybe the first time she looked at me and calculated what I was worth. Now, she wasn't grieving. She was managing optics. Tom's phone rang. He listened, then glanced at me. "That was Mrs. Delgado's office," he said. "They found additional documents in Raymond Mitchell's file. A package addressed to you, held pending the hearing." My throat tightened. "What kind of package?" Tom's voice softened just a fraction. He said, "It looks personal." When we reached Tom's office, the envelope waited on his desk. Manila, my name written in shaky handwriting that still managed to look precise. I stared at it for a long moment before touching it, because whatever was inside, it was proof that Raymond had seen this coming, and the man had been careful. So I needed to be careful too. I opened the envelope slowly, like it might bite. Inside were letters, dozens, all addressed to me, some sealed, some not. The dates on the corners reached back 12 years. My hands shook as I unfolded the first one. Raymond's handwriting was uneven, but the words were clear. He wrote about things he'd seen, things he wished he hadn't. Brandy too close to certain men. Brandy laughing in ways that didn't match the story she told at home. Brandy treating my trust like a resource to spend. In one letter, he apologized for staying quiet. In another, he said he'd tried to warn himself away from interfering. Tried to believe Brandy would choose decency if given time. Then I found a letter dated 9 years ago. A name jumped off the page like a slap. Derek Chandler, my best friend since college. The man who'd stood beside me at my wedding. The man whose kids had played in my yard. The man I'd lent money to once without paperwork because that's what friends do. Raymond wrote that he'd recognized Derek leaving the country club parking lot when Brandy was there. That they looked practiced, familiar. My chest went tight, like I'd swallowed a bolt. Tom watched me with the patience of someone who understood that sometimes truth needs room. I kept reading. The most recent letter, 3 weeks old, was barely legible. Raymond wrote that Brandy had come to hospice with papers, trying to get him to sign while medicated, trying to simplify the will, trying to remove protections. He wrote, "I refused." The nurse witnessed it. I'm changing it one final time. "I won't let her destroy you the way she's planned." I lowered the letter and stared at the desk. A grief I hadn't allowed myself finally rose. Grief for Raymond, yes, but also for the version of my life I'd believed in. The version where loyalty meant something. Tom cleared his throat gently. "There's one more thing." He pointed to a folded document at the bottom of the envelope. Medical paperwork. A blood type compatibility chart from the year our younger daughter was born. Notes in Raymond's handwriting. Brandy, A. Me, O. Emily, A.B. Raymond had circled it hard enough to leave an imprint. My mind refused it at first. I read it again, and again. The logic was simple. Cold, not moral, not emotional, just biology. A quiet possibility I'd never allowed myself to imagine. Tom spoke carefully. "This does not change that you raised her." I couldn't hear him. Not fully. My ears were full of memory. Emily's first steps, her scraped knees, her laugh in the back seat, her graduation cap tilted sideways because she never did anything the expected way. I stared at the paper until the ink blurred. "I need a test," I said. Tom nodded. "We can arrange one, but Henry, consider timing. Your daughters are already being pulled between loyalties. Don't hand Brandy another weapon." I swallowed hard, tasted metal. "Emily's my daughter," I said, and it felt like I was making a vow to myself. "Whatever a test says." Tom's expression softened, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Good. Hold on to that." Outside Tom's office window, traffic moved like nothing had changed. People went to lunch, checked their phones, lived inside smaller truths. Inside me, something had shifted. Brandy's betrayal wasn't a single act. It was an architecture, built over years, supported by people I trusted, designed to collapse on me at the moment she could profit. And now I knew the strange gift inside Raymond's warnings. I wasn't walking into this blind. I had time. I had evidence. And I was done being polite. People assume secrecy comes from guilt. Sometimes it comes from survival. 3 months earlier, Titanium Aerospace had approached me quietly about a position, Director of Quality Operations across multiple facilities. A serious job. Bigger than my shop, bigger than my county, relocation to Colorado, a base salary that would have sounded obscene to the younger version of me who'd started with one aging lathe and a rented bay. I hadn't told Brandy, not because I didn't trust her, not consciously. I told myself I didn't want to jinx it, that it was just exploratory, that I wanted to bring her good news when it was real. But now I saw the truth. Something in me had felt the floor shifting for years. Some instinct had kept that card pressed to my chest. And because Brandy had filed first, because she'd made her theatrical move before the offer became official, the timing mattered. Not in a petty way, in a legal way. It was mine. That night in the hotel, I opened the email chain with Titanium and reread the message requesting a final interview. The language was confident, specific. They wanted me. I closed the laptop and sat on the edge of the bed listening to the low hum of the air conditioner. The room smelled like detergent and distance. My phone buzzed. Brandy again. "You have no right to interfere. The will is mine." I stared at it and felt something almost calm. She thought money was gravity. She thought it pulled everything toward her automatically. But the will wasn't a gift. It was a cage lined with rules she couldn't bully. And the life I'd built, the shop, my reputation, my discipline, wasn't a chain around my ankle. It was my spine. Tom and I met the next morning. We filed immediately to freeze unauthorized asset transfers, to secure my access to insurance coverage, to compel disclosure of marital funds. I didn't do it with anger. I did it with precision. Brandy had tried to remove me from health coverage quietly. We responded loudly, with paper and dates and proof. She had siphoned money to her mother. We requested account histories and traced the pattern. She had attempted to sell the house under a false premise. We documented it and included the judge's statement about misrepresentation. That afternoon, Titanium called again. "Mr. Lane," Patricia Voss said, "we'd like to move forward. Can you interview next week?" I looked out the window at my shop lot in my mind, the place where my life had been honest even when my marriage wasn't. "Yes," I said, "send the details." When the call ended, I felt the first real sense of control I'd had in weeks. Not control over Brandy, control over myself. That night, Mia called, my older daughter buried under medical school debt and exhaustion. "Dad," she said, voice tight, "Mom says you left because you couldn't handle her success." I closed my eyes. "Mia," I said softly, "I left because she told me to. And because there are things happening that I need to handle the right way." "She says she'll pay off my loans," Mia whispered. "She keeps reminding me, like it's a leash." There it was. The inheritance wasn't just a weapon aimed at me. It was a tool she planned to use on our daughters. I swallowed the taste of bitterness. "Your education matters," I said. but your freedom matters too." Silence stretched. Then Mia exhaled, shaky. "I don't know what to do." I opened my laptop and stared at Titanium's offer summary again, like it was a lighthouse. "We're going to do this carefully," I said, "and we're going to do it without selling your soul." After the call, I sat alone in the hotel room and realized something else. Brandy thought she'd won because she'd taken the first swing, but she'd done it while I still had cards she didn't know existed. And Raymond, quiet, stubborn Raymond, had made sure of that. The temporary hearing was 3 weeks later. Family court, beige walls, tired chairs, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly guilty. Brandy arrived with her attorney and a posture that said she expected the room to applaud her. I arrived with Tom and a binder thick enough to count as furniture. When the judge entered, Brandy's expression brightened, her reasonable woman face. She played it well. She always had. Her attorney spoke first. "Your Honor, my client inherited substantial funds and seeks a clean separation. Mr. Lane has vacated the home and—" Tom stood. "Mr. Lane vacated the home at Mrs. Lane's demand, delivered by phone call, followed by presenting non-filed divorce documents." Brandy's smile tightened. It was small, but I saw it. Irritation at being interrupted by reality. Tom continued calmly. "We have evidence of ongoing transfers from marital accounts to a third party over 7 years. We also have documentation of an attempt to remove Mr. Lane from health coverage prior to separation notice. We have an attempted sale of the marital residence without authority, resulting in formal objection by a prospective buyer who is a retired federal judge." The judge's eyebrows rose at that. Brandy leaned forward, eyes flashing. "This is ridiculous. He's trying to punish me because I finally have something of my own." Tom didn't flinch. "This is not punishment, Your Honor. It is accounting." When he handed the judge the spreadsheet, the courtroom became quiet in that particular way, people sensing a story shifting from emotions to numbers. Brandy's attorney tried to object. "These transfers were family support." Tom's voice stayed gentle but firm. "Then they should have been disclosed." Brandy's eyes cut to me. In them, I saw a question. "How did you find it?" I didn't give her an answer. The judge asked Brandy directly about the insurance request. Brandy hesitated, then said, "It was a mistake, a misunderstanding with the provider." Tom produced the email timestamps and the request form. The judge asked about the home listing. Brandy said she'd been exploring options. Tom produced the realtor's message and the deposit notice. Brandy's attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied it. By the end, the judge issued temporary orders. The home could not be sold. Accounts would be monitored. Brandy would maintain health coverage, and an independent financial review would be initiated regarding the undisclosed transfers. Brandy's face stayed composed, but her hands told the truth. Tight fingers, knuckles white, nails pressing half-moons into her palm. On the courthouse steps afterward, she finally let the mask slip. "You think you're clever," she hissed under her breath as she passed me. "You think you can make me look bad." I watched her walk away. The sunlight hit her hair, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married, until her shoulders squared again into that hard, entitled shape. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something quieter, relief, because the story was no longer just what she said it was. Now it was what the paper said. And paper, unlike Brandy, couldn't charm its way out of arithmetic. Brandy tried the daughters next. Not with threats, with generosity. She called Emily and Mia separately, invited them to lunch, spoke about new beginnings, dangled tuition help and apartment upgrades like she was sprinkling joy. Mia told me about it first. "She says she'll pay my loans," Mia said quietly. "But she keeps saying it like I owe her my opinion." I sat in my truck outside the shop and watched my guys unload material, the kind of labor that never pretends it's anything else. She wants your loyalty, I said. Mia swallowed. She wants me to choose. I didn't tell Mia about Raymond's letters. I didn't tell her about Darren. I didn't tell her about the blood-type paper. Those truths were heavy, and I wasn't going to drop them on my daughters like punishment. Instead, I said, I won't ask you to take sides. I'll ask you to watch behavior. Who respects you? Who uses you? A week later, Emily called me with a strange steadiness in her voice. Dad, she said, I went to Mom's house. My chest tightened. Emily. I know, she interrupted. I was careful. I recorded our conversation. My throat went dry. Why? Because she talked like she thought she was untouchable. Emily's voice shook for the first time. She said she'd been planning this for years. She said you were beneath her. She said she could buy Mia's loyalty. I closed my eyes, felt my grip tighten on the phone. Emily sent the file. I listened in my truck as her voice and Brandy's voice filled the cab. Brandy laughed in that clean way I remembered from parties, except now it sounded empty. It's just business, she said on the recording. He never noticed anything. He's predictable. Then, Mia will come around. She needs me. When it ended, I sat in silence for a long time, hearing my own breathing, hearing the distant clang of metal from the shop. Emily's voice came back on the line, small. I'm sorry. I should have seen it sooner. I swallowed. You didn't do anything wrong. I want you to have it, she said. For court. Tom reviewed the audio and nodded. Admissible. She's speaking willingly, and Emily was part of the conversation. That night, Mia called me. She'd listened to the recording, too. I'm done, she said, voice hard. I'll take more loans. I'll work. I'm not taking her money. Mia, I started. No, she said. I won't be purchased. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and felt something break and mend at the same time. Brandy had tried to turn the inheritance into a throne. But the daughters, our daughters, had seen the strings. And for the first time since the call, I understood what my real win was. Not money, not court orders, not humiliating her. It was the fact that I could still be a father in a world that had suddenly made everything transactional. Brandy could inherit millions. But she couldn't inherit their respect. The DNA kit arrived in a plain envelope. No drama, just instructions, swabs, a barcode like my life had become a product to scan. Tom didn't push it, but he didn't stop it either. Sometimes certainty is a kind of mercy, he'd said. I sat at the small hotel desk with the kit open and stared at it for a long time. Emily had stood by me. She'd taken the recording. She'd apologized when she didn't need to. She'd said, Dad, like it was the safest word she had. I thought about telling her. I thought about dropping the blood type chart on the table and watching her face change, the way mine had. And then I imagined Brandy getting her hands on it somehow, turning it into a weapon, turning Emily's identity into collateral. No, some truths are not for court. Some truths are not for revenge. Some truths are for a man to carry so his daughter doesn't have to. I resealed the kit and put it in the drawer. Later, in the next hearing, Brandy's attorney tried a new angle, claiming I'd been unstable, suggesting I'd abandoned the home, painting me as a man who couldn't handle her financial growth. Tom responded with the simplest thing: patterns, the 7-year transfer trail, the insurance removal attempt, the unauthorized listing, the audio recording of Brandy calling it business. The judge didn't raise their voice, didn't scold, just issued more orders, stricter monitoring, a requirement for financial disclosures from Brandy's mother's accounts, and a warning against manipulating the children through financial promises. Brandy's composure held, but the shine was gone. She wasn't glowing anymore. She looked tired, like a person who'd built a fantasy and now had to carry it in daylight. After court, she waited near the elevator, blocking my path just enough to make it a choice. "You're enjoying this," she said, low. I looked at her, really looked. at the familiar face with unfamiliar eyes. "I'm not," I said. She scoffed. "Then what is it?" I chose my words carefully because I realized something. She wanted a fight, a loud one, a messy one, something she could point to and say, "See? This is why I left. I wasn't going to give her that." "It's the end," I said. "That's all." Her lips parted as if she had something sharp ready, but it didn't land. The elevator doors opened, and for 1 second she looked small, not remorseful, just startled by the idea that I wouldn't orbit her anger anymore. I stepped into the elevator and let the doors close between us. Inside, my reflection stared back, older than I felt, steadier than I'd expected. I didn't win by destroying her. I won by refusing to be shaped by her. The divorce finalized on a rainy Thursday, the kind of day Ohio does best. Gray sky, wet pavement, trees holding on to dead leaves out of stubbornness. The settlement was clean in the way clean cuts are, precise, still tender. Brandy kept the inheritance, bound by Raymond's restrictions. 5 years of tenant protections, limited rent adjustments, compliance checks, a fortune she couldn't fully play with. The house went to sale eventually, but only with proper process and split proceeds after debts and accounting. Brandy's mother's account history came into the light, and the quiet transfers didn't look quiet anymore under scrutiny. Some money was returned, some wasn't. But the story was written down now, in places Brandy couldn't edit with charm. I took my shop and my future earnings. Titanium's offer became real. Contracts signed after separation dates were clear. Colorado was suddenly a real map, not an idea. A new skyline, a new routine, a new set of noises I could control. The girls didn't come with me at first. Mia stayed for school. Emily stayed for her program. But they called, more often than they had in years, like the storm had cleared the air between us. Brandy tried once more, late in the process. She called me the way she used to when she wanted something softened. Her voice was quieter, almost careful. "We didn't have to do it like this," she said. I listened to the rain tapping the window of my apartment, listened to the calm inside my chest. "You started it like this," I said. She exhaled, irritated. "You could have just left." "I did leave," I said. "You just didn't expect me to take myself with me." Silence. Then she said, "I hope you're happy." It wasn't a blessing. It was a jab disguised as one. I looked around my small living room. Cheap furniture, stacked boxes, a life mid-transition. I wasn't happy. Not the bright kind, not the easy kind. But I was clear. "I'm going to be okay," I said. I hung up before she could answer. A month later, I visited Raymond's grave alone. I stood there with my hands in my coat pockets, the wind smelling like damp earth and distant exhaust. I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't need to. Gratitude doesn't require performance. On the drive back, I passed the old house one last time. New owners, different curtains, a porch light that belonged to someone else's story. I thought about the man I'd been before, working, trusting, assuming love was a contract that renewed automatically. And I thought about the man I was now, still working, still tired, but no longer guessing. Brandy had inherited millions. What I inherited was smaller and heavier and far more useful. The ability to measure what mattered, the discipline to document what was real, and the quiet dignity of walking away with my spine intact.